Welcome to this February 5th Community Budget Forum. My name is Dr. Kimberly Armstrong. I have my team here who will introduce themselves in the chat, let you know their name and the position that they hold at the district office. And we are going to get started. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes going over the agenda. And as I mentioned, if you just popped on and you're in need of interpretation, go ahead and click the button that says More with the three dots, and it'll say Interpretation, and then select the language that you prefer. So tonight, the goal is to welcome you into this space and share a little bit more about budget engagement. I'm going to provide an overview of our current state, and our Chief Financial Officer will share out initial recommendations. We want to talk a little bit more about the impact on schools and educators, ways to get engaged, and how to provide feedback. And then we will open up a question and answer session where we will invite you to ask questions through the Q&A feature. We'll read some of those out loud. I'll share some that's already come up, and then I will close us out. The Q&A button is live right now, so you can begin populating your questions, and I have a team of people that will begin sharing answers. So thank you for that. So we are here due to our $40 million budget shortfall. There are three reasons why we are experiencing a budget shortfall. The first one is rising costs. So inflation has resulted in higher costs for goods and services. We continue to invest in our employees and teacher planning time. PERS costs are also rising. PERS is our Portland Educator Retirement System. I think that's correct. I'm sure my CFO will correct me if I did not read that acronym right. And our student needs continue to grow. Limited revenue, right? Our state dollars continue to fall short of the cost to operate our schools. We have less special revenue, and we also saw the end of federal pandemic aid. And then lastly, declining enrollment. We have fewer students and the same number of buildings, and our funding is dependent on the number of students that we have. Since 2020, Portland Public School student enrollment has declined at about 9.5% faster than Oregon's 6% is projected to continue to decline. So, those reasons are why we are here with this $40 million shortfall. So this has been a multi-year process. So since 2022 on through this year, we have really been working with a cost containment strategy. And what that essentially means is that we've been restricting hiring and making sure that we implement spending limits, and at the same time making reductions. So that was allowed us to be able to focus on where we're at this year, the $40 million deficit. And that's 40 million of 105. And I'm going to explain that number here in a second. What we also know is that we're continuing to plan for reductions due to the three reasons that I listed on the previous slide. So our future outlook is that we will continue to have conversations about restricting hiring, spending limits, making sure that we're optimizing schools and that we're using our investments wisely. Let me talk a little bit about the timeline and how we got to the 40 million. So last spring, the previous administration announced that there would be a 72 million two-year budget shortfall and that they needed to take immediate action. So in the 23-24 school year, they made a recommendation of $30 million in reductions that impacted this academic year. That left about 42 million to reduce. Fast forward in November 2024, we found out that there would be a 32 million PERS increase that added to our deficit, right? Taking that number um, back up. Well, our governor made a recommendation to increase the investments in schools, and she recommended an additional um, amount to the current service level, what we call the CSL, not funding to the quality education model that we need to fully be able to support our students in schools, but fund an increase to the current service level. That increase to the current service level resulted in about $20 million of funds coming back in. So we were able to put that directly towards that PERS increase, as well as use some funds that we had in a PERS investment account to buy that rate back down lower. So essentially, it took us right back to our number that we were left with after the 24-25 reductions, which is $40 million. I'm going to turn it over now to our Chief Financial Officer, Michelle Morrison, to speak a little bit more about reductions over the years and where we're at today.
Thank you, Superintendent Armstrong. I appreciate this opportunity to be here and certainly appreciate all of the community members that are joining us tonight. We have, as you mentioned, this has been a multi-year challenge for Portland Public Schools, and in an effort to keep eyes on student services, stability in our schools, there's been a real effort and focus on reducing central office and centrally dispersed services to our schools. So you can see over the course of multiple years, a 4-year period, as we look at 2025, 26, that the total reduction for central services is at $67 million. We have heard feedback and will continue to hear feedback about central office as advocates are coming forward to serve students in schools. And so we believe that this information was really important for the community to have.
Thank you, Michelle. And as you go on to the next slide, I don't know what acronym I was reading, but PERS being Public Employee Retirement System, that we all, of course, know. And so I apologize for getting into my other Portland acronym over there.
Thank you. Well, it's Portland too. So all Portland public agencies are impacted by these changes in PERS. So it is important to note that. I'm going to take some time now and go through a list of proposed reductions that have been circulating in the community for a few weeks now. This is an approach to the budget that is different in an effort to increase transparency and engagement and get feedback from community at every level, from staff to you tonight. So we're going to just take a little bit of time to go through this list. You'll see that the proposed reductions are categorized by first central office, which is also centrally distributed into our schools. So this will also have an impact to services, but it's more from a district level than within any single school. So we thought it was important to categorize that differently. You can see that across the board, we've been reviewing positions and considering some services that can be streamlined through position reductions. Again, this is the 4th year in a row of that exercise. And so this is where it's getting challenging to operate from a district level at these cuts. So we have our classified staff, 7 positions, which are maybe portions of certain positions that we realized through a standard of attrition. You can see the projected savings amount there associated with those positions. We have some senior leadership staff that are leaving or their work is being reorganized in a way to streamline but still provide services at a high standard for our schools. We have our licensed staff, and those would be instructional folks. We have non-represented staff, and they are not represented by a union, but they're critical in their systems knowledge or their supervisory knowledge, and we are reducing that by 3. We have 2 administrative positions, which we are going to combine as well. We have several grant programs, not just federal aid, but we have a sunset on multiple grant programs that required a match from Portland Public from the general fund. And by the ending of those programs, we are able to also reduce that match. We have a reduction to central office travel, which may not seem significant, but it is in terms of professional development and
En cuanto al desarrollo,
oh, hi, Spanish interpreter. Central office travel when we are working between schools or out of district if needed, there's a reduction there. We have some facility services reductions, which can significantly impact our interfacing with schools. We have some contracts and non-personnel items as well that we are looking at trimming back. Again, how to streamline services in a way that impacts schools and students in the least way. Those are listed here. We have some security. We've invested in kind of extra layers of security, and we're planning to scale those back a little bit. And then also limiting that charter bus use, which is when we are engaging with a vendor to provide a different type of student transportation than we would normally use. And so you can see that the central office total is $12.2 million and a total of 23 positions. And now we get into our school levels. And at each school level, you will notice that we, as Dr. Armstrong mentioned earlier, we have an enrollment decline, which is happening at a faster rate in Portland than other areas in the state. Because we're funded on a per student basis, that also means that we need to right size our staff as we are serving them, as that is how our revenue is received. So you can see at the elementary school, we're looking at a reduction of 27 positions, $2.5 million. In our high schools, by adjusting our staffing formula to increase class size by 1 student, that's a target. It'll be more or less depending on the course. But you can see that that is almost $3 million in savings. And then we had some supplemental services to high schools as well. So that total at that level is just under $5 million. For K-8, you can see that the primary reduction there is due to enrollment decline. All right, so we're moving on to middle school. We had some supplemental staffing for dual language. Title I supplemental staffing, so very targeted for those areas. And then again, due to enrollment decline, that totals $2.4 million. And then we have several areas that are, they span across all or multiple grade levels, depending on the type of staff that we're looking at. We have positions that we have been able to provide to schools listed here: instructional coach, interventionist, social emotional supports, and school site instructors. And a 40% reduction to that group of supplemental licensed staff would result in a position change of 69. We also have a pool
¿Qué
of
hace
staff,
cambiar 69 puestos?
a pool of staff that we have used and will continue to use, but it will be at a reduced level to kind of balance our staffing as we move from projected staffing levels into our actual when school starts and we have students in schools. So you can see that multiple levels totals just over $17 million. And then very lastly, we have some changes to our multilingual learners staffing. Again, that is tied more indirectly to enrollment declines as well.
And then thank you for that, Michelle. Before I get into engagement, I wanted to answer a question live. I didn't mention directly about the impact of some of the decisions coming out of the federal government and the funding. And there was a question about how does that funding impact our district budget? And do we anticipate any of the presidential executive orders or attack on Department of Education having any impact on our budget? The answer to that is absolutely. So what we're planning now is what we're hearing. And again, this has not been confirmed, but what we're hearing from state officials as well as those who are closely connected to the federal government is that there will be a recommendation of a Title I budget reduction of about 25%. That is impactful as those funds are directly sent to schools and does fund positions like intervention staffing, professional learning, and other supports. And we're also hearing that there could be an elimination of Title II and Title III funds that support migrant education as well as professional learning. You know, we have started this process with a model saying early and often, meaning that we want to get you information as soon as we know it, and we want to communicate with you as often as possible. We have moved forward with planning for the reduction of Title I by 25% and the elimination of Title II and Title III, though we don't know if that is part of it or the entire thing, until we know that there are some things that are solidified and what how our state is providing some wraparound services. It'll be difficult to communicate early without having all of that information. But absolutely to the question, are the federal funding impacts that you all are hearing about regarding the Department of Ed or any federal funding to schools impact us? It absolutely does. And let me turn it over to Chief Kafori to talk about engagement.
Thank you so much, Dr. Armstrong. My name is Deborah Kafori. I'm the Chief of Staff to the Superintendent. And we wanted to talk a little bit about our engagement process. This is just the engagement that we have done to date, basically, for winter 2025. We will soon be coming out with our spring agenda, so folks will know what they have other opportunities to tune in. As you can see, we have done several to date, but we are still very early in this process. I want to commend our superintendent for bringing this very important topic to our community early. This is much earlier than we've seen this level of detail in the past. And that's because our superintendent knows that these cuts are going to be painful on top of the multi-years of doing it, and that we want your input and your voices to be heard. And just to show how early we are in this process, you'll see here the Board of Directors of the school board has adopted this timeline for when they will be working directly on the budget. And you can see that it culminates with a vote on June the 10th. So there's a lot of time for your voices to be heard and your input and your suggestions. We look forward to hearing more from you during this process. The board also passed an advocacy agenda. This is the 2025 legislative session advocacy, and you'll see that The very first item on here is investing in high quality education, and that refers to the quality education model that was passed by the legislature in 1999. I know there was a question about what was the difference between if we had fully funded the quality education model and what the governor's proposed current service level is. And there's about a 2 billion, yes, that's billion with a B, $2 billion difference. If the quality education model were fully funded today, it would be about $13.5 billion. And the governor's increased CSL, current service level, while we're very thankful for it, it is $11.3 billion. So you'll see that's our second, the second item on here, because we want to ensure that with all the competing issues that are facing our legislature, that they, at the very bare minimum, at least fully fund the governor's current service level. I also should say that in the however many years it's been since 1999, 26 years, the legislature has never fully funded it. So it is a dream and a stretch, but we believe that our children, our communities, and the people of the state of Oregon deserve that. There's also other areas here that we're going to be advocating for. You'll see that a lot of them say fully fund or fund, because we know that our teachers and our staff here and our families know what's best for our kids. We know how to teach our kids. We know how to give them the education supports that they need, but it's hard to do that without the appropriate amount of funding. Next slide, please. So this is all to tell you that we at Portland Public Schools are not just sitting back and allowing these cuts to take place. We are advocating. We are going to Salem. We are talking with our legislators. We are talking with our federal delegation. We're talking with our local delegation, because we know that in order for our kids to receive that high quality education, they need the funding that only comes from the state of Oregon. So on these slides, which will be posted on our website under a budget category, you can click on this hyperlink here, the State Advocacy Toolkit, and it gives you instructions. I know there are a lot of people aren't familiar with how to lobby your legislator. You might not even know who your legislators are, and that's okay, because you can find out very easily. And then once you find out who your legislators are, we give you some examples of templates and scripts that you can use, whether you're calling, whether you're emailing, or whether you're going to participate in one of the advocacy days that we will be setting up. And on our website, we will have a list of ways that you can get involved if you're interested, if you have the time and the ability to go to Salem, or even to go to our local schools. I know that Dunaway Elementary School in Southeast Portland is having a legislative advocacy night on February the 10th. I know that Roosevelt High School is having an advocacy night on February the 20th. And we are also hosting a advocacy night, a virtual advocacy night on February the 12th. And Nicole Watson is posting these in the chat so you can see flyers on how to access these important events. And also we will have them on our website. And if you want any more information, you can always reach out to us at Portland Public Schools. So there's also tonight, you can put your comments. We have a lot of time left to answer your questions. And if you go to the bottom of your screen where it says Q&A, you can click on there and you can write your comment on that slide. If you're feeling that you really don't want to participate at this moment, or you wake up in the middle and say, hey, I've got a question, please please use this hyperlink here. I'm sorry, this QR code, and you can send us your comments that way. Also, we will have all of these slides available online if you want to share them with your communities. If you have groups that you're involved with, you're a parent and you have a parent community that you're involved with, and you want to use these slides, they will be available. We'll also have a link to the audio version of tonight's event, so you can listen to that if you would like as well. Dr. Armstrong?
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that. And then I'm seeing a couple of questions in the Q&A about will these slides be sent out after they will be posted on our website. This, as mentioned by Chief Kafori, this video will be posted on our YouTube channel. And then I'm also getting some questions on here about being able to review the budget and wanting more information. And that certainly came up in our school board meeting last night. So we are working on providing a little bit more detail that gives some more information on like what percentage of reduction is this, or is this a total reduction, so that the information can be made more clear. That will take us a couple of days to update. What we imagine is being able to produce an FAQ at the end of this week after we have went through this first round of the engagement that we will post on our budget website that should answer some of the or hopefully all of the questions that you have around the budget. Okay, so I think the next slide just really takes us into the Q&A section. I will say that there are already questions that are being answered. And so hopefully you're able to click on that Q&A button and see what's answered. We have a couple that are open now, and I'm going to call on some of my team members to be able to answer that live. I'm going to go to, and Chief Kafori, you may have answered this, but the question was, has the PPS board met formally yet with the state legislator during the session to request more funds to help close this gap? And how much have you requested for the 26-27 year? And how does that number compare to the state funding number being used in the $40 million deficit? So that's a two-parter, I think, for both you and Chief Morrison.
Sure, thank you. Yes, the Portland Public Schools Board is meeting with state legislators already. We actually try to meet with them year round to maintain and develop relationships and to get them into our schools so they can see what's happening in action. I know a lot of folks don't have kids in school right now. A lot of people in the legislature, or it's been a long time since they themselves were in school, and things have dramatically changed. It's a, it's a lot different to teach a kid in today's world than it was back even 5 years ago. As I said earlier, the amount our board has asked the legislature for is $13.5 billion. That would fully fund the quality education model. The amount of money that the legislature has, the governor has in our current service level budget is $11.3 billion dollars. So as you can see, that's quite a difference. We are not holding our breath that we're going to get the quality education model funded, but we're sure going to try.
Thank you for that, Chief Kafori. And there's also, while you're already on the mic, there's another question around raising the cap for the local levy to be able to raise more funds. Are you able to answer that one now?
Yes, another move that the legislature made in 1999 was to allow local communities to tax their own people through a levy as opposed to a bond. Bonds are for buildings and levies are for people. We recently passed a levy here in Portland, you may remember, in May of 2024, and that went to teaching positions. So while they did allow local communities the ability to do that, there is still a cap on the amount that you can ask your community for. So that is an item that we have had on our legislative agenda for several years, asking them to raise the cap, which will allow our local community to contribute more to saving teaching positions here in Portland.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Let's see. There is a question around declining enrollment in the same number of buildings, and if we're planning to close any schools, and if so, please help us understand how you select schools to target for closure. I appreciate the question. It has come up a few times. We do believe in optimizing our schools. There are still a lot of information and answers that we need. And so we believe that later this spring, we will be prepared to engage in conversations around enrollment balancing, and optimizing our schools so that we are utilizing our resources wisely and that we are increasing opportunities for kiddos. And so, while this academic year we are not having a conversation about closing schools, it is a conversation that we will start later this spring and be engaged in all throughout next year. Okay, there is a question about Indian education being protected. I'm going to ask Chief Buno to respond, maybe read the question and your answer.
Yes, thank you. Jay Buno, Chief of Student Support Services. So the question is, how will Title VI Indian education be protected in light of efforts to close the Department of Education at the federal level? And so my response is the Indian education program is additionally supported by district resources, and of course, the loss of federal funding would be significantly impactful to that programming. And so as a system, we are currently trying to proactively plan around how to continue to provide services and resources should that occur. And most importantly, even with that planning, a loss in federal funds would have a huge impact on our system, and advocacy to the state would be of huge assistance related to how we could continue to support programs with the loss of federal dollars, if that were to actually happen, would be huge.
Thank you. Um, Chief Morrison, can you share a little bit more about when people can expect the proposed budget and where they can find it?
Yes, I believe the actual date was in the timeline that we had in this presentation. Again, this is a very early look at items that are being identified. We do have the 2024-25 adopted budget available on the public website currently, and that's a really good point of reference if you compare this list to information that is available already online, because we're talking about a change from the current year that was planned, published, and delivered, and moving into 25-26.
Thank you. I appreciate that. There's another question about helping community advocate with elected officials effectively by being able to show a side-by-side comparison of reductions, um, looking at the current year budget. We don't have that document produced right now. We do have what the outlook has been, or not the outlook, I'm sorry, what the reductions have been over the last couple of years, and then what the impact is today. I'm hoping that the timeline and narrative around the 40 million can be useful. You know, essentially, we need to do what's right for the kiddos that we have in our school. We know, we've seen the data around the percentage of our kiddos who are reading by third grade on grade level. We continue to have concerns about math achievement across grades. And so, in order to make sure that we're creating learning environments that has all of our students at or above grade level, we need the resources to be able to educate our students. And we're going to continue to do what we believe is right on behalf of students. We have to find ways to do it with fewer resources, and that will put a strain on the system. And it will mean that we'll have to think differently about the ways in which we educate students. But one thing that we won't compromise is a quality education in Portland. And so we also know with that that there are a lot of programs and resources that we pride ourselves in being able to offer. ways in which we look to get supports into classrooms with our teachers, and we have to think differently about those things as our funding is not matching what we need. And so really when I think of the narrative in Salem, in the hearing room, what I hope that you all bring as educators, as family members, as siblings, as students, or whoever you are on this call, those personal stories about what's been impactful for you and your student or the student that you support. Hearing about high cost disability and the importance of being able to fund that, hearing about some of the unfunded mandates that we're expected to do without the funds, knowing that we continue to have rising costs and the funds that we receive in aren't going to the places where we need it most because of some of those other mandates that we have to address. So what I hope that you bring in is not necessarily just the financial outlook for Portland. We will do that. We will talk about that. We will show the numbers. We will get into the details. What I hope that you bring are the personal stories, what's important to you and your family and your students. Um, that's what I hope that you bring into the hearing room in Salem. Chief Kafori, can you talk about the advocacy toolkit? There's a question about where to access it and how to train others, how to use it.
Yes, the advocacy toolkit will be available on our website, our PPS website, and then I've asked staff to put it in the chat tonight so you can access it right now if you're interested. And I know there's a lot of questions, which I am so excited
Mhm.
about how people can get involved. And I would say probably the easiest way, since the easiest way is to access one of these budget forums or community forums that Nicole Watson has put into the chat. And she's also just added the state advocacy toolkit link. You can also send me an email and I'll direct you to how you can best get involved. Maybe one of these events doesn't work for you tonight or work for you this month, or you have time later in the month, or you have time next month. There's going to be a lot of opportunities. So I'm going to put my email in the chat. Send me yours, we'll connect, and I'll make sure that you get on all of the lists, distribution lists for when events are coming up. Because I believe, as I've said several times, there is a lot of energy in the Portland community to help advocate for our schools, which warms my heart. And also, I want to make sure that people have that ability to participate.
Thank you, Chief Kafori. There's a question Matt is asking, what do you think is the most powerful action that those on this call can take as parents to advocate for more funding from the state for public education?
Yeah, that is such a great question, and I think that you answered it, Dr. Armstrong, when you said sharing your personal stories. I mean, numbers and statistics are always helpful to have, but really telling the story of what it's like for your child. If your child has special needs, if your child is in a classroom with 33 children, if your child um, lost their favorite teacher due to budget cuts, any kind of story that you can tell about how these cuts have affected you. I think always having positive stories helps too. If your child was struggling to learn to read and they really connected due to uh, the newly adopted curriculum that we have, or they had a teacher or caring adult who took the time to invest in them and brought them over the hurdle of the gateway to literacy. I think these are the kind of stories that people that our legislators need to hear. I just will say one more thing. There's a lot of passion this year about the cuts and the continued cuts, the cumulative effect of these cuts on our district. But I think you also need to remember that legislators are people too. And when you talk with folks, uh, maintain your sense of decorum and your sense of professionalism. And that's why I think also using positive stories really helps as well, because there are a lot of amazing, amazing things that are happening at PPS every single day. And sharing those stories with your legislators helps as well.
Thank you for that, Chief Kafori. I'm going to go to Chief Morrison. There is a question in there about an antiquated formula for calculating school funding. Is that going to be addressed in this upcoming legislative session? Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Thank you, Dr. Armstrong. Yes, it comes up actually every full session, a review around the state school fund equalization formula. It is a distribution formula for revenue. There is not a direct tie to how expenditures are made on that. And I think that's the piece that people tend to advocate for, again, every session. And I think that for districts, all 197 school districts in Oregon, there's a finite amount of money. And so when you change the distribution formula, there are winners and losers depending on local economy, student demographics, and all of those things. And I think it typically ends in a gridlock in terms of change. But I do think it'll come up as a topic. I do.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate it. And, there's a comment in there, comment about, so many of the programs that we already have are underfunded. And there's a need for more robust core classes and making sure that our students continue to access technology, music, band, and other opportunities. And that is certainly our commitment as a team, certainly my commitment as superintendent. Like I said, we cannot risk the very nature of what public education is about. And yet, there are funds that we depend on to run schools. And so we're grappling with that, and we're going to do everything that we can to advocate. I know that Chief Kafori's email address was put in the chat. I think I saw something about, how do you volunteer or if you want to get involved. We're also going to have a day in Salem, a PPS day in Salem, and we will be advertising that. And we encourage those who are available to join in as we go and take our testimony into the hearing room. We really want our elected officials to hear our stories and understand the impact and why, funding public education is foundational for setting up our city to be exactly what we need it to be, a rich, vibrant, thriving place. We also are projecting the flyer for both Dunaway on February 10th so that you can see that. And then on February 20th, Roosevelt. You see, we'll have some panelists. The group that has organized this is the Community and Parents for Public Education. And their goal, their task is to get public schools funded at the quality education model that we hope that will solve many of the woes that we have here. And so we join them in that, we partner with them, and we want to acknowledge and elevate the work that they're doing as a parent community. So that information is there. You can take a picture of that. It was also dropped in the chat, the flyers, and we'll also put that information on the website. But if you're looking for other ways to get involved, I would say get involved with the Community and Parents for Public Education as they're doing some excellent work. And you can see the QR codes to scan, the RSVP, and I personally look forward to seeing you at Dunaway on the 10th of February. Okay, we have a few more minutes. There's some questions. I'm going to see if any of my team have grabbed some that they want to answer live or any others that come up that you want to address here publicly.
Dr. Armstrong, I'd like to interject just for a minute. I know while our team is circulating around the questions and preparing answers for those, but just a note around the impact of not just federal program funding, but our the PERS impact, and that impacts all public agencies in the state. And so knowing that as a parent, I'm a parent as well, considering how competitive it's going to be in Salem this legislative session to set a level of appropriation for K-12 in Oregon that sets the standard for the next 2 years, but also the platform for the following biennia. So that's my view, and I just wanted to make sure that the community had a good understanding of that.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you for that. Let's see. I see more about, oh, there's something about the state advocacy toolkit link not working. Did we drop that in the chat too, just to make sure we had that? Okay. Well, it looks like the link is fixed and also being dropped in the chat. Um, Okay, let's see. I think I'm gonna call on Chief Franco. There's a question. Knowing that overall funding is limited, can you explain the process of determining different levels of per student funding at different schools?
Yeah, sure. Happy to take that one. Thank you, Dr. Armstrong and John Franco, Chief of Schools. And I think I did address this a little bit. There was a question about kind of differentiated support for schools. And so, just so you know, we are very cognizant and very proud about how we differentiate our funding in terms of staffing allocation for um, our title schools, for example. Our title schools are schools with 60% poverty and above, or schools who serve more historically underserved students. So we're very cognizant about that, and our staffing formula does take that piece into account. So it isn't a global, everybody gets the same. We do differentiate support according to our differentiated model of staffing support.
And I will say that our board is really proud of the equity funding formula, and that will be, as always, discussed, reviewed in the budget meeting. There is the public engagement once the proposed budget is ready for the board to review, comment, and ultimately vote on. And so those dates we shared in this presentation, but you will also see those dates on our budget website as well. So we also invite you to attend our board meetings and ask questions as they come up. You are always invited to email us so that we can make sure that we're giving you answers to the questions that you have. Okay, and then there's a question on with the recent board decision to end school foundations be potentially reversed given the budget shortfall. I'm going to give that to Chief Kafori.
Thank you. I was just putting something in the chat. Could you repeat the question for me?
Yeah, with the recent board decision to end school foundations be potentially reversed given the budget shortfall.
Um, That is a question that the board would have to answer. So I don't have any insight into their thoughts on that. I haven't heard from anyone that it's a possibility, but this will be the first year that we don't have those additional funds. And I know that there are schools that will be experiencing cuts due to that. So I would say if you're interested in reviving that, that's something that you would need to reach out to your school board member about.
Yeah, and I think I would just say that I know that there was a lot of work that went into that decision. And I believe that we as a district staff will look to do everything we can to support schools, understanding some of the unique challenges that they may face due to some of these budget shortfalls or even looking to strengthen the model too. So know that we have that top of mind as well. We're reviewing the impacts to schools and we're taking that into account. I think our hope is that the fund for PPS will be a way that we are able to support schools in a deeper, more, I would say, holistic way. It's just going to take some time to grow that fund and be able to do some of the things that we hope to do. And I will say that it should not be on families or communities to provide FTEs to schools, right? Like that is through the state. Like the funds that we receive from the state allows us to be able to fund our schools adequately. And our hope is that that happens. And until it does, we will continue to do everything that we can to support our schools within our budget, and even looking for ways to be creative and innovative as well.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Armstrong. I was going to put in a plug for the fund for Portland's public schools, which is, I'll drop the link in the chat to the website there as well. And just last night, the board of directors of the school board appointed the parent group, the PAC, that will be overseeing those funds. And so there are going to be a lot of ways to be involved in the fund for Portland Public Schools, which is was it used to be around back in the day, and it was incorporated into All Hands Raised, and now it's back at Portland Public Schools, and we're going to be doing a lot of fundraising efforts in that direction. Currently, we're focused on advocacy. That's the goal of this session, but you will see a lot more work on doing fundraising, local fundraising for all schools in Portland Public Schools.
Excellent. Now, some of you, I know we've answered about 44 questions. There's still about 10 open. We're not going to be able to answer those within the 10 minutes. And if you did ask a question and you're like, hey, it's been sitting there for quite some time, it means that we need to get some more data. What I can commit to is that every single question that was asked will be on our FAQ, and it will be published. So we have a Q&A from the educator session, have a Q&A from this session, and we will continue to populate the FAQ and push it out. So if your question wasn't specifically answered tonight, it will be answered on the FAQ sheet that you will receive. Um, I would also encourage you to grab this link that's in the chat or use your phone to scan the QR code to give feedback. That's an additional place where you can ask questions and share comments or thoughts about some of the items that we have on our proposed list. And if you have some alternative thoughts or other innovative ways for us to make some cost saving moves, then we definitely want to hear about it. Again, our commitment to you is early and often. We will continue to communicate early and as often as we're able to as information becomes available. I do want to thank you for being on. We're going to leave the chat open just for a couple minutes, as I know some people may be scanning the Q&A to grab some of those answers. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to be on this call with us and this Zoom with us. And we hope to see you at an event next week or the week after. Thank you for being here.